People don't like to ruffle the feathers. They don't like to disturb the status quo.
Grace Andrews here today. Yes, indeed. And I think you work on a little podcast with a guy called Stephen. Does he smell as good as he looks?
Grace,
Hello.
for those that don't know what the Diary of a CEO is, please explain what you guys do.
Diary of a CEO is Europe's #1 podcast. It's more than a podcast now. Would all say we're absolutely obsessed to the point it's probably a bit toxic. You know, at school you're told, just do what you're passionate about. And that's terrifying because I had no idea what I was passionate about. Society tells you you've got to find your passion, I think, to be like a super unhelpful narrative.
What if I were to rephrase the same hypothesis as passion gives purpose?
Purpose for me is I'd moved back into my family bedroom and it just felt depressing. I'd applied for every grad scheme under the sun and I was getting rejection. I turned to my friends from uni and said, like, is anyone else feeling like this? Because I'm so lost. And I'm just going to do that because I'm kind of playing it safe. I've never played it safe.
Grace,
Hello.
just mentioned that you watched a few of these podcasts, so you may be expecting this question. But I start all my podcasts with the same question in order to set a certain tone for the rest of the conversation. And that question is, are you happy?
Diving straight in here. Yeah, I am. I am really, I think what I describe myself as is content.
Okay.
I look back to where I was in the last few years, 5 years ago. I do a lot of reflection because I think it brings you a lot of sense of gratitude to where you are now. And I think I'm starting to do a lot more things for me that bring me a lot of joy and not listen to all the noise and the things that society tell you should be doing or should be making you happy, X, Y, Z. So yeah, I'm super happy right now.
What is from your understanding then the difference between being content and being happy?
I think the word it's all super subjective, right?
Of course.
But content for me brings a sense of peace and a sense of calm and a sense of the ability that if something comes at me now in negative news, rejection, bad feedback, I'll be okay. It's not going to take a massive hit and it's not going to knock me back. I'll just be able to kind of stay where I am. Whereas happy for me is almost a temporary state of elation. In reaction, it's quite reactive. I don't think anyone's happy 24/7.
Yeah.
So content for me is more of like a state of mind or a mindset that I'm in where I'm sitting kind of in the middle ground, and the waves are going to come and the happiness is going to come and the sadness is going to come, but I can always come back to that stability in the middle.
Right. So judging on that reaction, you probably don't believe that we should chase happiness, right?
I think from my experience, it comes and goes. Like sometimes it's in your control and sometimes you can make it happen, and 90% of the time it's not. And it's the same for I'm literally imagining, like a wave graph right now, and it just comes up and it goes down and it's super unpredictable and loads of it's out of your control. So if you're on this pursuit to chase happiness, you're going to end up spiraling. Like I've found myself doing it. You just spiral into the ground. And actually I see, as I said, happiness is a result of loads of different things. So it's a reaction to a state of mind or a reaction to an event or a reaction to something totally out of your control. So for me, it's a worthless pursuit. It's just, it's a reaction. It's something that happens as a result of X, Y, Z. So enjoy it when it comes. Yeah.
Often, or at least I've also found that often it's an after the fact realization. You don't necessarily realize in the moment that you're happy. It's just looking back on, for example, memories and stuff.
Exactly. And the things that bring me the most happiness or the most joy, and the elements that I can control, I can do more of them in my life to make sure I get that feeling, get that dopamine hit and feel those feelings as often or as little as I want. Do you know what I mean? If I'm in that state of contentment or feeling content, I can bring in that happiness as much as I know. Like those little hits, seeing my friends, getting some time outside, just going for a lovely meal. Like I can bring that sense of happiness. But yeah.
Nice. I use this podcast almost as research for a book that I eventually tend to write about the quarter-life crisis. And one of the guiding research hypotheses that I have is that passion equals purpose. What is your thoughts on that hypothesis?
I think for anyone who's heard Stephen Bartlett talk before, either he's rubbed off on me or I show a very similar perspective on this concept of passion, because I'm passionate about loads of things. And this idea that society tells you you've got to find your passion, I think to be like a super unhelpful narrative, because it just sends people down these very restrictive routes, stressing that, you know, they found their passion, where's mine, as if it's this prize that you unlock, or this jar with a label on that you can pull out your passion. Like, that's not how it works. So the way I see it is I try and find, you know, loads of things that bring me joy, and I'm passionate about learning. I'm passionate about good food. I'm passionate about the people that I work with and watching them thrive and being a great leader. But to try and put it all into a box and say that my passion equals my purpose, I actually find to be just kind of like a generally unhelpful narrative, because I don't think one equals the other and one goes hand in hand with the other. I think amazing if you're a person who's found what brings you so much joy and you love, and that fulfills you with purpose, fantastic. Like, if it's an after result of it. But I think...
What if I were to rephrase the same hypothesis as passion gives purpose?
For sure. I think there's an element. I think purpose for me is something that is fulfilling from the inside. Like, if you shut off all the noise and all the narratives and all of society telling you X, Y, Z, purpose is something that, like, when you do it, you feel fulfilled, you feel content, you feel like you can sleep at night, all of those sorts of things. And I think for sure, that sense of feeling and that sense of calm has got to come from something that you also enjoy doing and that you feel intrinsically passionate about. And for sure, I think they can go together, but this sense of searching for passion or searching for purpose as if they're literally prizes or things or one thing or things that don't change. Like, God, even in the last 5 years have my passions changed, or I've discovered new passions or things that I love or things that bring me joy, and they're evolving and ever changing. So to stick kind of your purpose to a passion, I find unhelpful, because what if your passion changes and then do you lose your sense of purpose? Or does your passion evolve and it's fluid and your purpose is attached to that fluidity?
I was about to say, could also challenge that indeed purpose doesn't necessarily have to be one specific thing either. I want to challenge what you're saying, so I'm curious just to see, because I've been obviously I've asked a few people this question by now, and what I seem to see in sense of overlap is that there seems to be a difference between what you're really passionate about versus what you enjoy doing. And an example I get given a lot by mainly men usually is they are really passionate about football.
Yeah.
The question then comes to mind, are you passionate about it in the sense that you would get up and do it every day, even on days that it feels shit, and that sense passionate, or do you just enjoy doing it? So I guess the same question goes for you as far as you mentioned food, for example. Are you really passionate about food, or do you just enjoy eating or making or whatever it is good food?
I think it's a great question, and I think I would suggest I'm passionate about food because of the feeling it brings me when I'm
right.
And it's not just the food, or like, I think it's more both the sense of making and curating food because it creates an experience with whoever you're doing it with and builds that connection. And for me, that's very purposeful.
Yep.
Human interaction, connection, that's a big tick for me, and sense of fulfillment. And then also going up for and centering food. For me, I mean, we could go and talk about this, but like, food plays a huge role in conversation for me. I always sat around a dinner table with my family and it built that connection. So food for me is like a central point of focus that I feel is not passionate about, you know, specifically what it is, but it's the whole experience of eating food with other people. So that's kind of a bigger point. And I think for 100%, like we'll go down and talk about how there needs to be that level of overlap. If people are searching for their purpose, like, start by looking for what you're passionate about, and that all links together. But I think these words in themselves in isolation when you don't have time to really dive into them or find the nuance or find the context. And they're just thrown around. You know, at school, you're told, well, just do what you're passionate about. And that's terrifying because I had no idea what I was passionate about. Or actually, I had loads of passions and they changed 10 times over the last month because you're a teenager and things are changing all the time. So I just think telling people to go do X, Y, Z because they're searching for a passion or searching for their purpose doesn't delve into the real depths and nuances of the conversation.
Do you then have any way that you do find the time to get to the root of what you then, let's get away from the word passion, maybe instead say care about?
Yeah.
What you could see yourself doing?
So for me, I look to enjoy, and two parts. I look to enjoy what I'm doing as much as I can every day and do my best every day. And when you take a step back, that looks like, you know, some days it does work and some days it doesn't work and all of that sort of thing. But I think, so for example, the concept that a lot of people will tell you or say to you, or I hear all the time that I've struggled with personally over the last year, 2 years, is people telling me to find this work-life balance, right? And that's made me go into this really deep dive and trying to understand what that means. Because for me, I'm so passionate about the work that I do. It is part of my life and it's not one or the other, but I'm also super passionate about seeing my friends and family and spending time completely by myself and reading a fantastic book and all of these other things, food. So for me, when I've broken it all down, I've actually gone, okay, all those things bring me loads of joy. They bring me so much joy. So instead of looking to separate work and life, I'm just doing this thing called life.
Right.
And one of those things right now in my life is the work, and it brings me huge amounts of joy. And all of those little things I just see as kind of, I don't know, percentages or blocks in my life, and they just go up and down and they move and they ebb and flow. And that's what I look for when I seek this sense of contentment. I'm saying I'm saying contempt.
Being content.
Being content. And that's what I seek now. So I think for so long I was seeking this, and this is why I've kind of feel the way I do about purpose and passion, blah, 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 because for so long I was seeking these like answers to these narratives, work-life balance, purpose, passion, blah, blah, blah. And people would be like, well, is this the job you're going to do forever? What about your 10-year plan? All of these things. And it's so overwhelming. So I just stripped it all back. And I was just like, what do I enjoy doing? What brings me joy? And how can I just increase those in my life and get rid of the things that don't? So it's not a case of fitting narratives or like finding your purpose or X, Y, Z, because it all moves and it all changes. Like if I've learned anything over the last kind of 5 years since leaving university, it's just everything comes and goes. It all goes in waves. It all comes and it all changes. And there's only so much you're actually in control of. Yeah. So just control the things that you can and make sure that you're doing a little bit of one of those things or all of those things that bring you joy each day. And you don't have to separate it into passions. You don't have to separate it into work-life balance. It doesn't have to fit any of that. Like, it's just strip all of the noise, strip everyone else out of it and just focus on you and what you enjoy. And that for me has been the key to feeling intrinsically, internally fulfilled, where you sleep at night feeling like you've done your best that day.
Yeah.
Sorry if that's not the answer you're looking for.
No. All good. That is the whole purpose. Because I think the key the point that you just touched on in particular is that there's not necessarily a distinction between work-life balance. It's just life, and work is a part of that. And I think that taps into this narrative of, as you said, you love, I think, even the work that you do. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people, and I think that's where the work-life balance topic comes into discussion, that don't love what they're doing.
100%.
And if we, again, take rid of the passion, because I see that is limiting to some extent because of the topic, same as I've often had a discussion as far as purpose goes, that people think purpose has to be this big thing. How are you going to change the world?
Yeah.
In reality, it could be your purpose to just be a good mom. Yeah. And take the best care of your kids that you can, right?
My purpose is just to try my best every day.
Exactly.
That's it.
I was listening to your interview with Sophie Miller from Pretty Little Marketeer, and I found your story as to how you, I guess, got to the point that you are now quite fascinating, because there was at least a lot of overlaps with mine as well. So if you could just sort of explain, I guess, also what you told there then.
Yeah, for sure. So I now work as head of content for Stephen Bartlett and the Diary of a CEO, which is Europe's #1 podcast and climbing the charts rapidly in the US. So now, 3 years into the role, it's an international brand. Going back almost 3 years now, when I started in the role, there were 3 of us in the team, and I don't think we were even top 50 in the charts. We were producing 1 a week, scrapping around to find guests. It was so far away from where we are now. It's unbelievable to look back and see how far we've come. To get to the way I got into that role, when there was only kind of 3 or 4 people, Stephen Bartlett wasn't known in the same capacity he is today. The Diary of a CEO was certainly not. He hadn't started doing Dragon's Den, so he wasn't it didn't have the sense of popularity that he does today. I saw him post this job post, and it said, hiring for a social media manager. And at the time I was freelancing with loads of small brands, helping them with their social strategy. I'd started to build up my portfolio. I was really, really enjoying it, actually. I just started to kind of understand the inner workings and started to make some moves, started to make some nice money. And then I saw this job post, and honestly, I wasn't looking. I think that's the difference. I wasn't looking for a job. I was very happy in what I was doing, and I'd kind of found content in what I was doing. And then I saw this, and all I thought was, what an incredible learning opportunity. I didn't see it as a job, and it sounds strange to say, but I just saw it as this incredible opportunity to learn from someone who, at the time, and still is, an industry leader in terms of marketing and social media marketing, which is what I work in. And I didn't really know much else. I didn't know how much it was going to pay. I didn't know the expectations. I didn't know the team. I didn't really know anything. It was just this job post that said it's going to be a really exciting learning opportunity. And I thought, I love learning, and what an opportunity to accelerate my career. So I applied, and there was something about it. I believe to some degree in manifestation, but there was something about it. I saw that post, and I knew, I could see it, I could visualize it. That was what I was going to do next. And lo and behold, 2 weeks later, a bit of pestering my now manager, I was in the role, and I'd started because I needed that kind of get-go behavior and that drive and that someone to just get stuck in, and I was willing to offer that. And it's been the craziest learning opportunity and learning experience of my life. And I say this to my team. I know I now run a team of 5 and head up all the content as opposed to being a social media manager. The opportunity to learn from some of the best, not only the best minds in the world when we have them on the podcast, but the people in our team are the industry leaders in each of the things they do, whether they're our guest bookers, our trailer editors, our podcast producers, our talent management, our commercials. They're all industry leaders. So I just genuinely feel so, so grateful and so lucky that I get to turn up somewhere every day where I get to continue to learn. And I truly believe that my learning started when my formal education ended, like without a doubt. I was taught and I consumed and I recited up until the age of 21 when you leave university. I started learning, like really learning about life, about myself, about relationships, friendships, family, romantic relationship, everything after my formal education ended. And I had that
you
brain
studied
space.
History, right?
I studied history because for no other reason than my favorite subject at school, my favorite teacher was my history teacher.
Yeah.
And because I was told I had to go to university.
Yeah.
I went to a really, really great academic school where I was given so much opportunity, but there was no other choice but to go to university. It wasn't even a conversation. It was even frowned upon to take a gap year already having secured your place. Do you know what I mean? It just wasn't an option. I think maybe one person from my year group didn't go to university. And so I did my favorite subject because I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. Like no idea whatsoever. No one could have told me, 18-year-old me leaving school that I'd be doing what I'm doing now. You couldn't have even told me 3 years ago. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just had a mind. I kind of didn't mind, and I was just always open, and I've always been quite driven to work. So I've always just tried different things out. I always kind of had a some sort of on-the-go job at university, whether it was like handing out flyers and leaflets or working on a club door till 3 a.m. in the morning, or doing some surveys, anything. Like I would just pick up jobs here, like waitressing, hospitality. Like I just like to do things. And I left uni and I felt really, really, really lost. For those first 6 months, I had no sense of, it's not part of direction. I had no sense of direction. I've been, through this system of school and then chucked out the top, and I had no idea. I'd moved back into my family bedroom, my childhood bedroom with my family, having lived out, and it just felt depressing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was only about 6 months, I'd applied for every grad scheme under the sun with no idea. I was applying for all these sorts of things that I had no qualification or no sense that I even wanted to do it. I was just doing it because that's what the next thing you did. Like you did the exams and then you applied for the grad schemes, and I was getting rejection. I can't even count 50, 100 rejections, to the point where they wouldn't sometimes even reply. They just, they just completely ignore you. And it was, I didn't know what to do. I lost all sense of direction. And it was only about 6 months later, I was doing some temporary work. I just picked up some shifts here and there. I think I was working in a pub. And I turned to my friends from uni and said, like, is anyone else feeling like this? Because I'm so lost and so confused. And why is no one telling me what to do? And they were like, oh, yes. They were like, me too. And only when we started talking and sharing those experiences, and there are so many fantastic communities now. I do a lot of talks with gals who graduate who are community set up for that exact reason, to bring people together at that time. It was very confusing, give them some direction, or just allow a forum to speak about it in a safe environment. And
it's the exact same reason I started this podcast.
Because no one knows. There's no handbook.
And also, especially because of the lack of preparation that university gives you for it.
Yeah.
There is this image that you go to university in order to study for a job, and you prepare, and once you come out, you'll have all the skills you need in order to do that job. And that's just, as you say, how it goes. And then you do those 4 years, have a completely different lifestyle to what the typical 9 to 5 is, get into the typical 9 to 5, and then you're like, well, this is not what I signed up for. And I think what stops most people at that point is like, well, I didn't sign up for it, but I'm getting money in. I probably can't really switch anymore because, I studied for this and I don't want those 4 years or whatever, 6 years to be a waste of time. And as a result, people stay in that until they retire.
I think I'm very lucky for so many reasons, but I'm lucky to be someone who was born with this innate sense of curiosity and drive. I was that person who, when I finally secured a marketing internship, after 3 months, they offered me the full-time role. And I was kind of a bit like, oh, that's a shame. I wanted to go and try something else now. I wasn't happy or excited to be given that sense of stability. And in fact, after 6 months, which nobody tells you to do, don't leave your first job. You've got to get 2 years on the CV. Otherwise people will ask why you've left, or they'll think you got fired. And I was so bored. I was actually literally working in the building opposite. And I was so... It wasn't fulfilling what I wanted to do anymore. And I'd learned as much as I thought I could learn there. And I just kind of handed in my notice and went, I'm going traveling, sorry.
Yeah.
And no one, everyone's like, why are you doing that? Don't do that. You need to get it on your CV. Why have you only been there for 8 months? How are you going to get a job when you come back? And I just always thought like things will just work themselves out because I'm so interested.
Do you think they said that because somewhere deep down they wanted it themselves, or because they truly believed that?
I think family, and I'm so lucky I'm supported by such an incredibly strong and driven family as well. But people don't like to ruffle the feathers. They don't like to disturb the status quo. We both know all sorts of people who've been in the same job since they started when they were 20 all the way through to retirement. That's because they like that sense of stability and that security. I was given, I was given so much support when I spoke through the decision, but a lot of people in their first reaction is always like, but university told us we really should do our first job for a few years for that, for that stamp on our CV. And I'm just going to do that because I'm kind of playing it safe. I've never played it safe, like ever, since I was 3 years old. Like I've never played it safe. I've the loudest in the room. I'm the one I'm disruptive. I change things up. I do things the opposite way when I've been told to do it another way. So I've got that innate kind of curiosity and drive and desire to do things differently. But yeah, it's interesting. I just think I love to learn. So any opportunity to learn or do something different or find out something new or speak to someone new is just fascinating for me. So, and I also think it's it's obviously a generational thing. Like,
yeah. I mean, as you know, the podcast is called The Quarter Life Crisis. And at this point, after speaking to a certain amount of people, I've also come to realize that having a quarter life crisis is in itself a luxury, right? Because there's plenty of people out there who simply cannot afford to have a quarter life crisis. On that topic, would you describe this phase of your life that you're just talking about that way?
As a crisis? I was thinking about this on the way here. I think I've been through turbulence and things have been challenging and overwhelming, but I don't think I am in a position to say I've ever been in crisis, right? Because I wouldn't afford myself that kind of, I find that quite like an extreme situation. And I think I've always had such a level of privilege in so many different areas of my life that I can never call anything that I've been through a crisis.
Right.
But for sure, super overwhelming, confusing, lost, like mild, probably depression, like not clinical or just mildly depressed probably is the better word to say it. But just feeling so confused and just waiting for someone to hand me that handbook with the solution and the answer out. It's only when that mindset shifts and you start talking to other people about it that you realize it's only going to happen if you go and make it happen. And that was the click. That was the switch in my mind. I was like, okay, here we go. I'm going to go make this happen. I remember I thought I'm going to pursue journalism. That's what I thought I was going to do. And I returned to my dad. We were actually on holiday at the time. And I said to him, like, I think I want to go back to, because you have to go to university here to do a master's to get your qualification to become a journalist. So it's almost like a qualification as opposed to uni, but you have to do it at uni. And I said, I think I want to do journalism, but that means I've got to go and do a master. I was 22. Got to go and do a master's. And I just think it's too late. I'm too old to go and do a master's. And he turned to me, almost shook me. I said, if you turned to me at 50 and said you wanted, 70, if you wanted to go and do a master's, it's never too late. It's never, ever too late. And I was like, oh, but because everyone had gone and done their master's straight away after university, I felt like I'd missed the boat and I should be working, because that's what the timeline says to do. Yeah. So I went and did that. And that's how I ended up actually discovering social media journalism, then dropped the journalism bit, just went into social media marketing. And it all evolved from there, just from having an open mind and just being curious and looking up and seeing what's around me and having conversations with people, starting to build a profile on LinkedIn, going for coffees with people, and just having that desire and curiosity. I think about it all the time because I think I feel like I'm in such a amazing job where I love what I do, and I think, why me? Like, why am I so lucky that I've been afforded all these opportunities? And I used to say it was all luck. Like, I used to say, so lucky that I got that job, but actually, yes, it's a little bit of luck. Yes, it's a little bit of right time, right place. But it's also all the stuff you put in to get yourself in that position, so you're in the perfect position when the opportunity arises. And I didn't, and I probably don't still give myself enough credit for getting myself into that state of mind where I was the best candidate at the right time. Yeah. Or I gave them enough willingness to learn.
I personally have a bit of a love-hate relationship with the word luck. And as a result, actually, I end up, I have a vlog that I put out every week in which I discuss how or challenges I'm either facing with the podcast or what I'm doing to make it grow or anything that relates to the podcast. And actually, I realized only recently that the sole reason why I do that is because if anyone, whenever this podcast becomes successful, says to me, you got lucky, I'll be like, go back, watch all the vlogs that I made over the course of however long it takes. Tell me if it's still luck then.
It's so you're social proofing yourself. Do you know what I mean? That's what we call it. We're vlogging, and we go through this kind of conversations all the time because people say it to Steve, right? People say, you got lucky. And he goes, well, there's always a tiny little element of right time, right place, all of those sorts of things. But it's not the right time and right place if you're not putting yourself in the right time and right place.
Yeah.
And that's why he'll always refer back to, there was an article a while ago that said you got lucky, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, well, I've got 8 years of daily vlogs to show what I was doing to get lucky.
Yeah.
And if that's luck to you, fine. But it was also, sleeping 3-hour nights, traveling the world, grafting, sleeping on the floor, not going on a plane until he was 22. Like, do you know what I mean? All those things. But it's easier for people to say you got lucky, isn't it?
Yeah. It's having the talent. I think that's what people mistake for luck, but it's having the talent to be able to see the opportunities. Because if you're not able to see the things that are potentially in front of you, then...
Well, it comes back to like a growth mindset or a fixed mindset, right?
Yeah, kind of.
So growth mindset, you're wanting to improve, your eyes are above ground. That's how I see it. Fixed is like eyes to the ground. You're not looking, you don't know when the opportunities are coming up.
Yeah.
I've read a lot about the growth mindset and the fixed mindset, and I've always just resonated so much with this growth mindset. And I didn't really believe or understand that people genuinely had this fixed mindset. And I thought, how strange that, because the whole, all the books and all the writing is about transforming yourself from this fixed mindset to the growth mindset. And I'd read them and go, I've been in this growth mindset my whole life. Like, I'm always looking and pushing doors. And that's the other thing. Doors might be ready to be pushed open, but you're not giving them a little push. I think people are always like, oh, the door was open for you. It's like, no, actually, I knocked on about 300 doors and then shoved one open.
I understand the fixed mindset. And I think it also relates back a lot to the way we are educated, because education would have you believe that there's only one right answer that you have to memorize and you have to answer when the test comes up. And as a result, you're like, well, if there's only one answer, there will be no other doors that I can open. And it was only until I started my own first business that I realized, okay, there are ways to learn. There are ways to develop that growth mindset, actually, and switch.
If you're anything like me, you may have spent months, to some cases years, trying to figure out what your passion is. You've eventually figured it out and are contemplating making the jump. In doing so, one of the first things you are faced with when building a new business or even being a creator is finances. Now, the select few love this part. I personally do not. So luckily, I'm very proud to announce today that I have a sponsor who is able to fix this problem for you. For the sharp listeners, you may know them from episode 30, Edwin from Moneybird. They decided to sponsor this podcast today. Now, I know that when I started with my business 4 years ago, I was super overwhelmed by all the things I had to do, from sending invoices to doing my taxes. It was all a lot and all very confusing and almost made me stop. Moneybird aims to automate the financial processes, such as sending invoices, such as sending reminders for invoices, such as giving you exactly how you need to fill in your tax overview. So if you're a starting entrepreneur or creator in the Netherlands, I'd absolutely recommend using Moneybird. I'll add the link to their website in the description down below. And with that being said, let's get back into today's show.
So I don't think there will be many people, but for those that don't know what the Diary of a CEO is, please explain what you guys do and especially what you specifically do.
Yeah, of course. So Diary of a CEO is Europe's #1 podcast and rapidly becoming internationally one of the top 10 podcasts in the world. It's more than a podcast now. We started with our producer Jack, and he would also book the guests, he would film, he would edit, he would do the full production, and it would be a case of kind of finding anyone with a good story to come on and chat with Steve, getting it out each week. And then we realized the opportunity. Podcasts were absolutely booming. They still are. And the uniqueness of having a platform or an environment where people feel like they can come and sit for 2-3 hours and just chat, and it's not going to be chopped up, it's not going to be pulled out of context. People are going to hear the full 2 hours. We do so little cutting. It's like ums and ahs that are cut out. The story is always there, and we all knew. We just knew that this was going to be big because we were going to put in the hours and we were going to put in the time together. So we started expanding the team, we started setting goals, and we started looking at the data so closely, like obsessively. And I think we'd all say all of us together, every element of the team of now 26 of us who work across this in different capacities, would all say we're absolutely obsessed to the point it's probably a bit toxic. Like we'll be the first to say that. Like we're looking at it, the podcast that went up this morning at 6 a.m. and then 8 a.m. onto YouTube, probably the thumbnail's been changed 5 times already, probably the title's been edited 3 times, probably the data has been followed, you know, almost to the 5 minutes to understand how we can move that, the trajectory of the growth, to understand all the different components. So we're obsessed. My role specifically started as social media manager. So I would look at and listen into the podcast episodes and understand which parts would work for social and how we could draw more people in, because podcasts don't grow organically because they're not search platforms unless you're on something like YouTube. You need to be growing, kind of using your other platforms that you've built up to bring your community over to the long form. So we were one of the first podcasts, definitely one of the first podcasts in the UK to care about filming, and we filmed every single episode in person because we saw that the production value goes through the roof when you're doing it in person, but also allows for a completely different conversation, like completely different. What you're getting on Zoom is always going to be limited, whereas it's not limited in a room. I mean, our cry rate of guests crying on the podcast is silly, and you couldn't get that on Zoom. No. Not that we rate or rate the crying, but we call it a cry rate because we think it's so crazy how many people feel so comfortable and so the ability to get so vulnerable in the room, and that they do cry. And yeah, so we started growing the team, growing everyone, and coming back to my role. So I would look at it, understand how to translate it onto social media, because people have very short attention spans, and how to get them to come and watch the long form. All different sorts of things, how we could build a community on different platforms and create a forum for people to discuss it, and all of those sorts of things. And then eventually, as our team grew, we've grown people on the team who manage the different channels. We have 3 people working directly on our clips. We produce 10 to 20 clips per episode. We do 20 episodes. We do 2 episodes a week. We're across 8 different social media platforms that reach over 10 million people. So the growth has been phenomenal.
Crazy, yeah.
But I don't think it was. I don't think you'd ask anyone in the team and no one would be shocked. Like, I think it's amazing to see how far we've come, and it's so important to look back to realize how far you've come, to really kind of understand the gravitas of it. But no one would be surprised, because every single day, my whole ethos of I wake up and try my best every day. Every single day, every single one of us on the team wakes up and has tried our best and pushed those limits and pushed the barriers and crew. You know, we were the first podcast in Europe to produce trailers, like movie level trailers, every week, twice a week, and hire a dedicated trailer editor. No one was taking podcasting as seriously as us. I don't know if anyone is. You know, you've got the Rogans and you've got the American podcasts who got it and understood the power of filming and why it was so important to share the audio first platform in a visual format. And we just recognized all that, and we ran with it, and we invested time, we invested money, we invested man hours, and we just knew that we were going to win because we cared more than everyone else.
Yeah.
And we were willing to fail faster than everyone else. We're experimenting on the daily. Like, we're experimenting in ways that people don't even think about experimenting, because we're talking about it, and we're there in person every day thinking about tweaking this. And when we saw you've got all the projectors and the predictors of your growth. There are loads of tools and platforms you can do to predict the growth based on your kind of last 5 months, 6 months. And we knew that it said after 5 years, we were going to hit 1 million on YouTube. And we said, okay, if we can shift that line by 1 degree, suddenly we're going to hit it in 3 years. What if we can shift it by 5 degrees, we're going to hit it in 1 year. Do you know what I mean? It was all those little things that, if you really understand the power of compounding growth and compounding interest, that every day you can make little tweaks that are going to shift that trajectory in a massive, massive, massive way. And that's something Steve instilled in all of us and in the team. And we're, like I said, we're obsessed. We're obsessed. We call it a show now. It's gone beyond being a podcast. We have live shows. We sold out the tour last year in a matter of seconds because of the insane community that's been grown and cultivated as a result of the podcast. We took it round the UK. We're taking it round internationally next year. And we experimented with that. Most people expect a podcast show to be two people on stage having a podcast conversation live on stage. And we went, okay, we're going to turn that on its head. We're going to have a 30-person gospel choir. We're going to have singers, performers. We're going to have the best lighting show. We're going to make it a show, and we're going to make it entertaining. And Steve understands from his social media marketing background and his marketing background, people, really understands human behavior and behavioral psychology and all of that sort of thing. So we know how to grab people's attention.
Yeah.
And now we're bringing out, we've just brought out products. I do a lot of I run the marketing for all of the product drops and everything we're launching there. And it really is just getting, I know it sounds crazy, but we really are just getting started.
It's not, I think I started watching at episode 23.
Wow.
I don't even remember who the first guest was, but I've been following for quite a while.
Yeah.
And many of the things that I do, or the way I'm trying to build this myself, comes from the things I learned from the podcast. So, I mean, you guys hear on the daily how much you affect people's lives, but I don't know. I'm pretty sure 90% of the quotes that I have in my head, I heard on the show. So that's, you guys are doing amazing work, and a bit of a fanboy in that sense.
I mean, it never get, like you say, you hear it all the time, but that's our why. Like when I say we're obsessed, that's our why. Like hearing people's lives actually changed as a result of something they held on, something you helped contribute to or produce. Best feeling in the world. So like it never gets old. We have a whole channel on our communications platform dedicated to impact. Anytime anyone sees anything, stick it in there. We read everything. We see every comment. We see every person who's broken up with their boyfriend because they've heard something, or person who's quit their job, or person who's been going through depression for 5 years and feels like they're coming out because of one thing one person said, or they've gone and got an ADHD diagnosis because of all of these different things. And that's why we do it.
Yeah.
It's not for the number, like the numbers are the numbers. It's not for any of that. It's not for the money. Like it's not for any of that. They're like side byproducts. And I think that's why we've been so successful at it, because we care so deeply about the true human real life impact, and we see it and we feel it, and it's incredible. So it's so cool to see that, like, all of this and all the things you're doing. And I see, your trailers at the start of episodes, or the care and the detail and the setup, and the fact that, you're from another country, but you've come to do this in person with me, is like the detail, and I can see it, and it's really cool.
Yeah. No, without a doubt, you guys, as I said, a lot of it is inspired on the basis of what you do. And especially, I think the part that I learned the most was this 1% better. And I have a team of 2 now that are helping me as interns, which in itself is still crazy to me at points. But I try and do the same with them. That's like, look, we don't have to hit 100 new viewers next week. But if we hit 1, and the next week we hit 2, and the next week we hit 3, it'll compound. It's just a matter of, are we able to hustle long enough?
It's patience.
On that point, I remember also that at some point you were starting your social climber page, and meanwhile you were working in a pub, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Right? Are there any pieces of advice, I guess, if people have this dream or this idea of, I want to do this, whatever that may be, how to stay motivated, that they put in the effort, I guess, put in the work for the bigger picture?
It's a great question. I can only kind of speak from my experience that your driver or your reason for doing it has to be so, like, intrinsically bound. It can't be that you want a car and you want to be able to afford that car. It can't be, I don't know, that you want to, whatever it is, like a monetary goal, because that motivation will run out. You'll get bored. Either you'll get the car and then you'll be like, what now? And you won't care about the thing you're doing, or you'll get bored because you'll realize that it's a monetary, materialistic item and it feels too out of reach, which is why I come back to this thing. And I've said it like 10 times this podcast. Like, if I just know that I'm doing my best every day and I'm just moving one step up the ladder and I'm doing it, that's not so overwhelming, and it allows me to stay motivated every single day, because I'm not going for this huge overarching goal. I'm just driven by my desire to do a little bit better every single day. And I mean, there's loads of advice and there's loads of thoughts on motivation and habits and all of this stuff. But I think your driver just has to genuinely be something you really deeply believe in, not something someone's told you or that you think you care about, because it's none of this stuff. Like it's not stuff. It's your reason for doing it. And maybe, and you know, I'm super aware, and I want to caveat everything I'm saying, that I have very little responsibilities at this stage in my life. Like I don't have kids. I, you know, have a boyfriend who totally gets it and gives me all the time in the world and is fantastic. And I have family who deeply care that I can fall back on if I need them. I'm very lucky and I'm very cushioned. So for me to say, you know, do something because you deeply believe in it, or do something because it drives you and you wakes you up in the morning. Like I understand that I don't have responsibilities that I need to afford to pay for, and I don't have, you know, I'm not in these desperate situations. So it's very easy for me to say as well. But I think and this is why I think it's really important to say that when I did start, I was doing like 6 different things at the same time to be able to afford to do the thing that I was loving doing in the evenings. Like I was going and working the 12-hour pub shift with a, you know, 1-hour lunch break or whatever, coming back in the evenings and doing my client work because it was pro bono and I wasn't being paid. And the reason I did that was genuinely because that I knew that if I did that for 6 months or a year, I'd be able to start charging. And I just saw it as a short-term loss for a huge long-term gain.
Yep.
And that was I'm just speaking from personal experience, like that was my motivator. And I've also seen people do jobs their whole lives that they're disgruntled about and that they don't find joy in, and they come home miserable. And I've seen that, and I knew that I would do anything not to have that as well. And I think that's deep down.
Exact same,
yeah.
Or in my case, it was my. So I guess for you to understand a little bit why I asked the questions about passion specifically, when I was from 12 to 15, I lived in Scotland, and my parents had a hotel there. And at that time was the first time that my dad ended up doing something that he truly loved, right? He was the manager there and the chef, or they owned the hotel, but he was managing and worked as a chef. And as a quite young, impressionable boy at that time, watching your dad do that with such passion, it was contagious. It's also where I still believe a lot of my entrepreneurship stems from. And we ended up going bankrupt because it was around the time of the recession. And the question is whether or not, where do passionate people get the ability, because they also fail, to get back up and just keep going, even if you fail. And that is what I'm trying to understand here, and also why I asked the question about passion in particular.
Yeah, I think from listening to so many incredible people on the Diary of CEO, everyone from I think at the top of my head, like the Monzo CEO Tom Blomfield, or even Whitney Wolfe Herd, who founded Bumble. These like incredible, successful founders and CEOs who are now billionaires. You know, all of them billionaires. But my goodness, did they go through hard times and hit rock bottom and not sure, unsure how they were going to get out of it or come out the other side, and bankruptcy or total failure, public humiliation. And yet, we're talking to them on the other side of it. And I think about it all the time. I think, what's the difference between someone like you and someone who doesn't have the drive or doesn't have the passion or doesn't have the feeling to wake up the next day and go, I can keep doing this? And like, is it an innate drive? Is it is it you're driven by revenge? Like, what is it that you're being driven by to get up and go again? I don't have I'm still learning. I don't have the answers to that yet, but I think it's so fascinating that some people have it and some people don't, or maybe people have it at different stages of their lives, and then it fades, or people have the energy or they don't, or again, did they have responsibilities where they go, I can't take that selfish risk anymore? I'm in this hugely amazing state of my life where I can afford to be quite selfish with all my decisions, so I can take quite high, it's like mirrored in investing. Like when you're younger and you don't have dependencies, you can go super high risk. But as you get older and you're looking at your pension pot and you're looking at your children, you're like, maybe I should bring them down to a medium risk. It's that sort of thing. So maybe it's a case that they were young, they were feisty, and they didn't have any responsibilities, and they could go, I can give this a shot again. Or I've learned so much that I know the mistakes I've made, and I'm learning, and I'm going to apply it differently next time. But it takes a lot of guts.
Yeah. I have a recurring segment on my show, and you've probably seen the jar in front of you, in which I've collected community questions. So I'd like to ask you to take one out. You can read up both the name and the question and then give your opinion on it.
How exciting. We love a recurring segment.
I know.
Kira Bar?
Yeah, it's my girlfriend.
Who helped you the most throughout your journey? What's so funny is actually so many people come to mind. I've said it a few times on here. Like I was thinking about this actually just last night. Like I've been so lucky to be surrounded by my family and role models, and my parents in particular, probably my dad in particular, who has this unbelievable drive that I've never really reflected on and realized how much it's impacted me. So, I've seen him work so hard his whole life, and it's infectious. Like it's people, because I've come from such a, I've had huge amounts of privilege in my life. I've had a fantastic education. I've been brought up in a really lovely, part of the world. And a lot, you see it all the time. People can have no sense of drive when they've been given so much. And I've always wondered, like, why am I so driven? Why would I didn't have to at university go and get all these jobs financially.
Yep.
I like, to be totally honest, I didn't need to, but I just always wanted to work, and I always wanted to find something, and I was always looking for opportunities. 100% comes from my dad. So I think he's given me that an innate sense of like drive, go get it, go find it, go do it, make it happen, which I wouldn't be in the position I am today if he hadn't done that for me. So I'm so, so, so grateful for my parents, and I'll give them a shout out. And then obviously the other side of things in terms of getting to the position that I'm in today and affording me this knowledge and opportunity and responsibility and trust, obviously where I work now. And I wouldn't even put it entirely down to like Steve. He's fantastic. Love working next to him. He's more like a friend and a mentor than like their boss. But everyone I get to work with, like my whole team and all the people we come across, and just all give me little bits to push me on my journey. And I do think I have the best job in the world. Like being able to get up every day and never have the Sunday scaries or never dread going into work. And having dreaded going into work, I know what that feels like in other jobs, is the coolest feeling in the world. And I feel so grateful. So grateful to the people who brought me up and grateful to the people who I get to spend every day with. They've all afforded me this wonderful opportunity.
I have two more questions. First one is, from all the podcasts that you have done by now, what number are you at now?
Oh, 250 something.
A lot. Wild. Is there any one particular that still sticks in your memory the most?
My favorite. Oh, I have so many favorites. The one that I think about all the time was Whitney Wolfhard, who was the CEO and founder of Bumble. She was the youngest female billionaire, founder billionaire, self-made billionaire. And she was the most down-to-earth, grounded human being I've ever met. You would never know if you walked by her in the street what she's done or what she's been through. And she's been through tremendous hardship to the point where there are, NDAs in court cases, which means she can't talk about it in detail. And her drive and passion those stupid words that I've demonized this whole podcast and I'm using in my own vocabulary, still learning. Her ability and her get up and go, and her mindset of thinking outside the box and doing things differently, I found so incredibly inspiring, and I reference back to on a daily, if not weekly, if not daily basis. She was actually, when I started out in the job, we kind of all wrote down or had a conversation about who our dream guests would be or who we'd love to kind of have a conversation with, and she was mine. So to have her kind of come on 2 years later, it was a real full circle moment for me. I posted about it on my LinkedIn as well. It's the only guest I've ever asked for a photo with.
Right.
And because a photo kind of doesn't mean much when this person's given you 2.5 hours of their time and you've had the opportunity to listen and meet them before and meet them after. It's like, what's a photo? Do you know what I mean? You've gained so much. The photo kind of feels trivial, but this was such a full circle moment for me, and it will be imprinted in my mind forever.
Yeah.
And Steve went, my head of content would love a photo, because I was honestly lost for words, and I'm not someone who ever gets lost for words, as you probably learned. I can talk and talk and talk. And I was like shaking, and I went up and I had this photo. I was so starstruck, and I listened back to that one episode a lot. It's super inspiring. She did an episode. The reason I found out about her was when I was at university. I listened to her on How I Built This, Guy Raz's podcast, and I remember being like, she was so high up at the competitor. Something happened. The competitor dropped her, and she went, "I'm going to go and build my own one now," and becomes one of the biggest dating apps in the world. Like, how cool that she's just this one person with an idea and went and made that global phenomenon happen. Very cool. I think she's very cool.
I know, but I also listened to that podcast. Obviously, what I also loved about that is the getting knocked down and then just get back up. Just do it. That's fine. Prove them wrong.
And
they'll
like
tell you
that
can't.
Public humiliation as well. Like,
yeah,
she was in all this, and most people will go, "Oh, I'm just going to retreat now. Like, I'm just going to go and do my own thing, keep a low profile." And she was like, "Nope, I'm going to go and do this publicly, and we're going to start straight away. And these people believe in me, and we're going to run with it." And it's that self-belief as well.
Yeah.
So cool.
The last question is, what does the future hold for Grace?
I don't tend to think too far into the future, because I think it can be a little bit restrictive. For me personally, people in my team have like their 5-year plans, their 10-year plans. My immediate future is one, to just keep enjoying everything I'm doing. And I think that's it for me. I've always said, like, if the enjoyment runs out or changes, or I'm not getting for a sustained period of time that sense of joy and fulfillment from it, then I'll, look to new horizons. But I'm starting to do a lot more kind of speaking opportunities and public speaking and events, and I absolutely love that part of what I get to do, and it's super encouraged by my whole team. So I'm loving doing more of that. And yeah, I don't tend to think too far in the future. Lots of things are changing in my life, so just trying to create a little bit more sense of stability is all I'm looking for.
Appreciate your time, Grace. I know you're a super busy woman. As a fan, I'll highlight the fact that I will be watching more and will be taking inspiration more. I'm loving what the work that you guys are doing, and cannot thank you enough.
Thank you so much.